Welcome back to the pre-learning module for Ship Safety Course Part 3. Part 3 of this module covers the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, MARPOL. MARPOL is the main international convention that covers the prevention of marine environment pollution by ships that result from operational or accidental causes. This slide introduces the Torrey Canyon disaster. The Torrey Canyon was a Liberian-flagged oil tanker that ran aground in 1967 off the western coast of Cornwall, England. The accident was caused by a navigational error. When the ship struck a reef, more than 100,000 tons of crude oil was spilled along the coasts of England and France. MARPOL 1973, the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, was adopted on 2 November 1973 by the International Maritime Organization. However, it did not have enough signatories and did not enter into force until 1983. During the late 1960s and 1970s, many oil tanker accidents occurred that resulted in cases of serious oil pollution. This slide shows one of the worst accidents from these times, the breakup of the Amoco Cadiz, a very large crude oil carrier, or VLCC, that had been registered in Liberia. In 1978, the Amoco Cadiz had been transporting 223,000 tons of crude oil and 4,000 tons of fuel when it ran aground off the French coast after a storm damaged its helm controls. The ship broke into two, spilling its entire cargo of oil. Following this and other disasters in 1976 and 1977, the Protocol of 1978 was adopted. Because the 1973 MARPOL was not yet in force, the Protocol was absorbed by the parent convention and amended. The Protocol included regulations to enforce the prevention and control of marine pollution from ships, especially oil tankers. It entered into force on 2 October 1983 and is known as MARPOL 73-78. This slide shows the structure of MARPOL 73-78. MARPOL articles stipulate general obligations, applications, and other details. Protocol 1 is concerned with incident reporting. Protocol 2 is concerned with arbitration procedures. The Convention contains the following annexes: Annex 1, Oil. Annex 2, Noxious Liquid Substances, NLSs in bulk. Annex 3, Harmful Substances Carried by Sea in packaged form. Annex 4, Sewage. Annex 5, Garbage. Annex 6, Air Pollution. The annexes define essential regulations for the prevention of pollution from ships. The most recent, Annex 6, was introduced by Protocol 1997 and entered into force on 19 May 2005. This section presents the outlines of MARPOL. Annex 1 covers the prevention of pollution by oil from operational measures and accidental discharges. Regulation 6 is concerned with surveys. Under this regulation, every oil tanker of 150 gross tonnage and above, and every other ship of 400 gross tonnage and above, is subject to initial, renewal, intermediate, and annual surveys. The 1992 amendments to Annex 1 made it mandatory for new oil tankers to possess double hulls, and also devised a phase-in schedule for existing tankers to be fitted with such hulls, which was subsequently revised in 2001 and 2003. The amendments will be explained in the following slides. Regulation 7 is concerned with the issuance or endorsement of certificates. Specifically, it is concerned with proof of compliance with Regulation 6. It states that an International Oil Pollution Prevention Certificate, IOPP, shall be issued after an initial or renewal survey and is endorsed after intermediate and annual surveys by the administration or recognised organisation, RO, which conducted surveys for the verification of compliance. Regulation 10 is concerned with the duration and validity of certificates. It defines how long certificates remain valid before they must be renewed. This slide shows the typical survey schedule and validity of certificates. Annex 1's Chapter 3 is concerned with the requirements for machinery spaces of all ships. Specifically, it is concerned with the handling of ship's bilge and sludge. Regulation 12 requires that every ship of 400 gross tonnage and above has a sludge tank with adequate capacity to hold oil residues. Its piping must go only to and from the tanks, with no direct external connection other than the standard discharge connection to the onshore facility. Essentially, sludge cannot be dumped overboard. Under Regulation 12A on oil fuel tank protection, ships with an aggregate oil fuel capacity of 600 cubic metres and above, delivered on or after 1st August 2010, must comply with this regulation. Individual oil fuel tanks shall not have a capacity of over 2,500 cubic metres. Ships must be constructed with a double hull or comply with accidental oil fuel outflow performance standards as indicated in this slide. Regulation 13 is concerned with the standard discharge connection. Specifically, it is concerned with the ship-to-shore transfer of ship's bilge and sludge. The ship's discharge pipeline for residues from machinery bilges and from oil residue shall be fitted with a standard discharge connection for shore facilities, as indicated in this slide. Regulation 14 is concerned with oil filtering equipment. The following is given under this regulation. Any ship of 400 gross tonnage and above, but less than 10,000 gross tonnage, shall be fitted with oil filtering equipment complying with paragraph 6 of this regulation. That is, equipment that automatically stops discharge into the sea when the effluent's oil content is 15 ppm or higher. Any ship of 10,000 gross tonnage and above shall be fitted with oil filtering equipment complying with paragraph 7 of this regulation. That is, equipment that automatically stops discharge into the sea when the effluent's oil content is 15 ppm and has an oil content meter with an alarm and automatic stopping device. The administration shall ensure that ships of less than 400 gross tonnage are equipped, as far as practicable, to retain onboard oil or oily mixtures or discharge them, which is done through the oil filtering system. This slide shows a diagram of the oil filtering equipment and piping arrangement for ships of 10,000 gross tonnage and above. The key devices are indicated by a red circle. The 15 ppm bilge separator is an oil filtering device for keeping oil content of 15 ppm or more out of the sea. An automatic stopping device does what its name implies. It automatically stops the filtration system via a switchover of a three-way valve and an alarm on the oil content monitor. The automatic shutdown activates at an oil content of 15 ppm. Recirculating facilities enable the automatic stopping device to be tested when the overboard discharge valve is closed. A sampling point must be provided in a vertical section of the bilge separator's outlet piping to allow a visual check. This slide shows the oil filtering equipment and accessories. During this course, there will be a technical visit to H&S Kikai Kogyo Company Limited, one of Japan's leading manufacturers of oil-water separators. This slide shows an example of an oil record book, ORB, a logbook required under Regulation 17 of Annex 1. The ORB is used as evidence in case of oil-related incidents. A ship's ORB must be preserved for at least 3 years after its last entry. The entries must be made in at least either English, French or Spanish. Part 1 of an ORB covers the machinery operation of all ships. Part 2 covers the cargo, ballast operation of oil tankers. Chapter 4 of Annex 1 covers the requirements for the cargo areas of oil tankers. Regulation 19 mandates a double hull and a double bottom for oil tankers delivered on or after 6 July 1996. A double bottom must protect the cargo tanks of every oil tanker of 600 deadweight tonnage and above, but less than 5,000 deadweight tonnage. Any cargo tank more than 700 cubic metres must also be protected by a double hull, as indicated in the slide. This slide shows the requirements for oil tankers of 5,000 deadweight tonnage and above, delivered on or after 6 July 1996. Cargo tanks shall be protected by the double hull structure. This slide shows the incidence of serious oil spills caused by old single-hulled oil tankers. The first is that of Erica, a 24-year-old Maltese-registered oil tanker that leaked about 20,000 tons of fuel into the sea after it sank off the coast of northwest France in a storm in December 1999. The next is that of Prestige, a 26-year-old Greek-operated single-hulled oil tanker that sunk in a storm off the coast of Spain in November 2002, spilling 60,000 tons of heavy fuel oil. Regarding the phase-out of single-hull heavy-grade oil HGO tankers, the double hull requirements of Regulation 19 apply to oil tankers delivered on or after 6 July 1996. However, in consideration of the many serious oil-polluting disasters associated with old single-hull oil tankers, including those shown in the previous slide, the International Maritime Organization, IMO, introduced an amendment to speed up the phase-out of single-hull HGO tankers. MARPOL Annex 2 covers Regulations for the Control of Noxious Liquid Substances, NLSs, in bulk. Annex 2 details the discharge criteria and measures for the control of pollution by NLS carried in bulk. Some 250 substances were evaluated and included in the list appended to the Convention. Noxious liquid substance refers to any substance categorized as a pollutant in Chapter 17 or 18 of the International Bulk Chemical (IBC) Code, or provisionally assessed under the provisions of Annex 2, Chapter 2, Regulation 6.3, as falling into categories X, Y, or Z. This slide shows a sample table from Chapter 17 of the IBC Code. The table indicates the pollution categories of NLS. This slide shows the relationship between the IBC Code and the pollution categories of NLS. The IBC Code's Chapter 17 lists the chemical products included in the scope of the Code's application, noxious liquid substances, in pollution categories X, Y, or Z, Regulation 6.1. The IBC Code's Chapter 18 lists the chemical products outside the scope of the Code. As indicated in the slide, these include some NLSs in pollution category Z, Regulation 6.1. That means that some of the chemical products in pollution category Z are listed in Chapter 17 as regulated by the IBC Code for safety reasons, even though they might not present a major hazard, but can present a minor hazard to either marine resources or human health. Thus, those chemical products are listed in Chapter 18 as not regulated under the IBC Code, but still hazardous as marine pollution. This slide shows the Procedures and Arrangements P&A manual. Ships officers use this manual to identify the physical arrangements and operational procedures that must be followed for cargo handling, tank cleaning, slops handling, and cargo tank ballasting and deballasting to comply with the requirements of MARPOL Annex 2. This slide covers the certification procedure for NLS tankers. An International Pollution Prevention Certificate for the carriage of noxious liquid substances in bulk, NLS certificate, shall be issued after an initial or renewal survey in accordance with the provisions of Regulation 8 of this annex. Chemical tankers that have been surveyed and NLS certified under the IBC Code shall receive the same recognition as the one for NLS tankers. Annex 3. Regulation for the Prevention of Pollution by Harmful Substances carried by sea in packaged form. The Annex entered into force on 1 July 1992. It stipulates general requirements for issuing detailed standards on packing, marking, labelling, documentation, stowage, quantity limitations, exceptions, and notifications. For the purpose of Annex 3, harmful substances refers to substances that are identified as marine pollutants in the International Maritime Dangerous Goods Code, IMDG Code, which is provided by the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, SOLAS, Chapter 7, Regulation 1, or substances that meet the criteria in the appendix of Annex 3. Annex 4. Regulations for the Prevention of Pollution by Sewage from Ships. The Annex entered into force on 27 September 2003. It stipulates requirements to control marine pollution by sewage. It prohibits the discharge of sewage into the sea except when the ship is operating an approved sewage treatment plant or when the ship is discharging comminuted, disinfected sewage using an approved system at a distance of more than 3 nautical miles from the nearest land. Any sewage not comminuted and disinfected must be discharged at a distance of more than 12 nautical miles from the nearest land. During this course, there will be a technical visit to Sasakura Engineering, one of Japan's leading manufacturers of sewage treatment units. Annex 5. Regulations for the Prevention of Pollution by Garbage from Ships. The Annex entered into force on 31 December 1988. It deals with different garbage types and specifies the distances from land and how garbage can be disposed of. The most important feature of this annex is its complete ban on disposing into the sea of all forms of plastics, including ash. Annex 6. Regulations for the Prevention of Air Pollution from Ships. The Annex entered into force on 19 May 2005 as Protocol 1997. The slide shows the structure of Annex 6. Chapter 3 prohibits deliberate emissions of ozone-depleting substances, sets the limits of emissions from ship exhaust on sulfur oxides and nitrogen oxides, and designates emission control areas, ECAs, with stricter standards for sulfur oxides and nitrogen oxides. Chapter 4, newly adopted in 2011, covers mandatory technical and operational energy efficiency measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from ships. Chapter 2, Survey, Certification and Means of Control. Regulation 6 is concerned with the issuance or endorsement of certificates. It covers air pollutant certification. An International Air Pollution Prevention Certificate, IAPP, and an International Energy Efficiency Certificate, IEEC, shall be issued after an initial or renewal survey in accordance with the provisions of Regulation 5.1 and 5.4 of this Annex to any ship of 400 gross tonnage and above before that ship may engage in voyages. This slide shows the process for issuing IAPP certificates to ships. An Engine International Air Pollution Prevention Certificate, EIAPP, is issued to the diesel engines which have been verified as complying with regulations concerning nitrogen oxide emissions. Other regulated items, such as the emission of ozone-depleting substances, ODSs, sulfur contents in fuel oil, volatile organic compounds, VOCs, and shipboard incineration, are verified by an initial survey to issue an IAPP certificate. Chapter 3 is concerned with requirements regarding the control of emissions from ships. Meanwhile, Regulation 12 is concerned with ODSs. The regulation applies to all ships. Nevertheless, the regulation does not apply to permanently sealed equipment where there are no refrigerant charging connections or potentially removable components containing ODSs, such as refrigerators for domestic use. The regulation defines ODSs, prohibits any deliberate emissions, and regulates new installations of equipment with ODSs to ships. Regulation 13 is concerned with nitrogen oxides. It applies to the following: diesel engines with a power output of more than 130 kilowatts installed on a ship constructed on or after 1 January 2000, and diesel engines with a power output of more than 130 kilowatts that undergo a major conversion on or after 1 January 2000. Regulation 13 does not apply to marine diesel engines used solely for emergencies. It defines major conversion as indicated in the slide. This slide illustrates the concept of nitrogen oxide emission limits. Marine diesel engines must meet the standards of the nitrogen oxide emission limits shown in this slide. Tier 1 covers the operation of a marine diesel engine installed on a ship constructed on or after 1 January 2000 and prior to 1 January 2011. Tier 2 covers the operation of a marine diesel engine installed on a ship constructed on or after 1 January 2011. The Tier 2 levels are about 20% lower than the Tier 1 levels. Tier 3 covers the operation of a ship constructed on or after 1 January 2016 in a designated emission control area, ECA, shown in the next slide. The Tier 3 levels are 80% lower than the Tier 1 levels. This slide describes current nitrogen oxide emission control areas, ECAs, designated according to criteria under Regulation 13. The North American Emission Control Area and the United States Caribbean Sea Emission Control Area are the currently designated areas under this regulation. The newly added North Sea area and Baltic Sea area apply to ships constructed on or after 1st January 2021. Regarding the nitrogen oxide technical code, for diesel engines regulated by Annex 6, the verification of nitrogen oxide emission is carried out in accordance with the provisions of the nitrogen oxide technical code. For each nitrogen oxide certified diesel engine, there must be on board a nitrogen oxide technical file approved by the administration throughout the life of the engine. The nitrogen oxide technical file must contain information such as the identification of the components, settings, and operating value that influence its nitrogen oxide emission. This slide introduces the current technology for nitrogen oxide reduction Tier 3. This includes selective catalytic reduction, SCR, exhaust gas recirculation, EGR, and usage of liquefied natural gas, LNG, or water emulsified fuel. During the course, there will be on-site training at the training school of Yanmar Company Limited, one of Japan's leading manufacturers of marine diesel engines that use new technologies. Regulation 14 is concerned with sulfur oxides and particulate matter. This slide shows the change of the sulfur content limits of fuel used on ships since the convention came into force. General requirements are indicated as global in the slide by a blue line. The current global sulfur limit has been 0.5 mass percentage since 1st January 2020. Global requirements apply to all ships regardless of ship size and intended service area. Regarding requirements in emission control areas, sulfur oxides ECA is indicated by a red line on the slide. While a ship is operating within an ECA, the sulfur content of its fuel cannot exceed 0.10% mass. As an equivalent provided by Regulation 4 of MARPL Annex 6, a sulfur oxide scrubber can be used, subject to the acceptance of the administration. Regulation 15 is concerned with volatile organic compounds, VOCs. It applies to tankers and controls VOC emissions for cargo transfer operations. Regulation 18 is concerned with fuel oil availability and quality. It ensures the availability of fuel and operational procedures in cases where a port state finds a ship that is not in compliance with the relevant regulations. Chapter 4 is concerned with regulations on energy efficiency for ships, that is, greenhouse gas measures. United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, commonly called as the Paris Agreement, is a legally binding international treaty on climate change. It was adopted on 12 December 2015 by 196 parties at COP21 in Paris. It entered into force on 4 November 2016. Its goal is to keep the increase in global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, preferably 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The agreement recognises that maritime transport is responsible for around 2.5% of global emissions, and emissions are expected to grow 50 to 250% by 2050. The IMO is responsible for the measures of shipping industries. MARPL, Annex 6, Chapter 4, provides mandatory technical and operational energy efficiency measures for reducing greenhouse gas, GHG, emissions from ships. Regarding initial IMO strategies for GHG measures, in 2018, the Marine Environment Protection Committee, MEPC 72, under the IMO's remit, adopted an initial strategy for reducing GHG emissions from ships, as indicated in the table. This was summarised as follows. Short-term goal: by 2030, reduce CO2 emissions from transport work by at least 40%. Medium-term goal: by 2050, reduce CO2 emissions from transport work by approximately 70%, or reduce the total annual GHG emissions by at least 50%. Long-term goal: in this century, phase out GHG emissions as soon as possible. To achieve these targets, MARPL Annex 6 introduced tools such as the Energy Efficiency Design Index, EEDI, the Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan, and the Data Collection System for Fuel Oil Consumption. Regulations 20 and 21 are concerned with EEDI certification guidelines. The regulations set up energy efficiency standards to reduce GHG emissions from ships. The EEDI is calculated for each ship in the design process. This slide shows the EEDI calculation formula. As the formula indicates, the EEDI is a value of CO2 emissions divided by the amount of transport. This means that the EEDI is the value of the CO2 emissions caused by carrying 1 ton of cargo for 1 mile. The attained EEDI value is confirmed via actual sea trials. The attained EEDI value cannot be more than the calculated value of the required EEDI. Both EEDI values are indicated on the Energy Efficiency Certificate. During the course, there will be a technical visit to the National Maritime Research Institute, which has one of the biggest towing tanks for confirming ships' EEDI values. Regulation 22 is concerned with the Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan, SEEMP. A ship-specific SEEMP must be placed on board by the time the initial survey of International Energy Efficiency Certificate is issued. The SEEMP includes specific measures for energy efficiency improvement to be applied to each ship. Regulation 22A is concerned with the collection and reporting of ship fuel oil consumption data. It introduced the data collection system for ships' fuel oil consumption and came into force on 1 March 2018. Data are transferred to the IMO's Ship Fuel Oil Consumption Database. The Secretary-General has to produce an annual report for the MEPC. Thank you for your kind attention. This concludes Part 3 of the module.